Welcome, everyone. Apologies for the glitches, trying out a new system here. But we are live, and I'm honored to have my guest. I'm going to let her introduce herself, but please tell the people who you are, what you do, and why you do it.
Yeah, so my name is Lorena Germán, and I'm the author of Texture Teaching as well as the anti-racist teacher. Yep, that one. And I work with teachers and schools and companies, organizations at the intersection of education and teaching, right? So like pedagogy and race, anti-racism, as well as like curriculum and design.
Mm,
So it's kind of like where those three corners me, that's where you're gonna find me.
yeah, yeah. That's a real good place to be, especially considering the context in which we are
Yeah,
kind of placed in right now.
right.
I wanna I wanna ask before we get to the
Mhm.
nitty gritty of your work.
Yeah.
Well, let me say this before I do any of that. I
Yeah.
want to say that when I first opened this book and read through it, um, for me, it
Mm.
was you were in my brain. Like the things
Oh,
that I was talking about and thinking, like you gave words to things that I was
oh,
trying
right.
to work through and understand in my teaching practice. So I truly
Mhm.
appreciate this work and recommend it to anybody and everyone.
Oh, yay. Thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Um, but before we get to this,
Okay.
Lorena,
Yeah.
I want to talk about you encountering, going through, matriculating through the K to 12 education system and your experiences, because I
Mhm.
believe that shapes a lot of who we see before us today.
Mhm. Mhm. That is absolutely the impetus for where I'm at. And it's a good way to get to even that book or any of the work, right? Because even without the book, the work stands, right? I was born in Dominican Republic and I came to this country when I was small. I was about 4 years old. So I was very much raised in the US, right? But at home, I was raised in DR. So anybody who is an immigrant understands that, right?
Mm,
And I think there's even elements of that like Black Americans can identify with in terms that like at home we Black, outside of here this is white American culture. You know what I mean? And
yeah.
so there is an element of that that obviously is relevant. But I have to start there because that immediately shapes my worldview. And so when I walk into school and I am taught only by white teachers,
Mm,
and I'm never taught anything that is affirming. It feels very much like a shock to my system because at home, my grandfather is an engineer
mhm,
and my
mhm,
grandmother worked at the Department of Education. And my father is a sports person who just recently, like literally a couple weeks ago, got a Hall of Fame award for his
mhm.
involvement in Taekwondo. So I'm coming from a house where it's like we right, like I understand that there is greatness in us. So like, where are y'all coming from?
Yeah.
And so immediately my entire education, there was just clashes. There was just clashes. And sometimes teachers would be impressed with my work. And I'm like, this is the bare minimum. What are y'all impressed about? Like it was, and that's not to say that that's not good, right? Like it's great for teachers to see that, but I just always knew something was off. And
Mm,
it all came into a screeching halt when I got to high school, where I really was in the most oppressive, abusive, and racist educational context I had ever been. It was
mm,
definitely worse than my middle and elementary school experiences, as bad as they were. The high school one was just kind of like over the top. Um, and so that shapes me because I leave high school understanding that I made it. Not that I was thriving through high school. Not that like I'm equipped now, but just like whew, survived that, got through that chaos, you know? And I just
mm.
always knew that that was off. And so when I got to college, I was like, man, I will never be in the education system. I'll never be a teacher, like absolutely never, right? Because if
Mm.
that's what teaching was, I'm not doing that. But I knew
Yeah.
I wanted to work with young people. So I was going in all kinds of directions, but of course was meant to be, meant to be. And so spoiler alert is that I do become a teacher. But Bobby, here's the thing, is that I started teaching by going back to that high school,
Oh wow.
and I didn't realize that that's what I had to do.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
it was just a very difficult experience to go back and to find myself with having colleagues that, some of these were the very people that were my, were staff when I was there, and being like, yo, now let's have a conversation. you know
Yeah. Yeah.
um
Yeah.
so that is some of what shapes me seeing. I don't know, have you read, I just posted about this too. I just tweeted about it. Have you read Bettina Love's Punished for Dreaming?
Oh my gosh.
That book was an emotional roller coaster for me. Never
Yeah.
mind, like, of course, the economics of it all and the reparations, that, yes, all of that, yes. But the scenarios that she was describing, I mean,
Hmm.
it was like my educational journey in or at least touch points throughout there. It was very emotional for me.
Yeah.
Um, and so, it really, I mean, like, the district where I come from, the high school that I graduated from and taught at, um, continues to be, to this day in 2024, taken over by the state of Massachusetts, the State Department
Hmm.
of Education. It's one of the only ones in the entire state of Massachusetts. And so, these underserved and strategically stripped districts, right, cause a lot of this pain. And so texture teaching, while it's a work for love and toward love, it does come out of walking through and experiencing an educational journey that was really painful for a long time.
Mm. I regret, um, because I mirror a lot of that in the sense that school was something that I survived and not necessarily
Oh yeah.
thrived in.
Oh yeah.
Um, I tell the story a lot, but it bears repeating because of what we're talking about, and that is, um, I was in the quote gifted and talented program at my
Okay.
school.
Mm,
It's my sixth grade year. Going through a lot, but didn't necessarily have places to process. And all that my school cared about, as
yeah.
most schools at the time, was whether or not you produce. You show up, you
Oh yeah.
produce. That's it.
Yep.
And so, um, first three market periods, B's and C's, struggling, getting in trouble. Um, had a lot going on at home that I didn't know how to deal with,
Right.
and I buckled down fourth market period, get honor roll, mostly A's, couple B's, and this is back when the teacher could write on the report card.
Oh yeah,
And
yeah, yeah. Mhm.
so the teacher goes to the comment section, she takes her
Mhm.
pen, she writes down, and she says, "This student does not belong in the gifted and talented program."
No.
Yeah, yeah. I still remember the handwriting and everything.
I was gonna say, and the thing about that was that, like, that joint was written in pen, so there was no erasing. You couldn't white it out. Like, before you said that, I was like, whatever the teacher would write on there, like, that joint was gonna stay.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh,
yeah, for sure.
I'm
Um,
sorry. I'm sorry. That's horrible.
yeah, yeah. It
I
was
mean,
hard
she
to
could have
deal with.
just said it.
But I don't think that she had she didn't have a lens to even see my humanity
Mm,
in that moment.
mhm. No, 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 no,
And
no.
so when it comes to how
She
she
was angry.
viewed me, it was
Mhm,
very much so, did you
mm,
do this or did you
mhm.
not do this?
A
And I don't
transaction. Mhm,
yes.
mhm,
Absolutely.
mhm,
Absolutely.
mhm.
And so
Mm.
fast forward now, but spoiler alert, we're both in education
Right,
now.
right.
And when I first started out teaching, I am I am kind of using these very high control methods that I was given in a
Mhm,
charter school.
mhm.
I am
Yes.
making sure I am over every single thing that a student is doing. I'm watching their hands. Do they have a pencil in their hand? And within
Mm,
30 seconds of it in the classroom, I am doing all the things.
mhm.
And the only reason I really got away with it was because I look like my students.
Oh, yeah.
but I was exacting so much harm. And so
Yeah.
I have to go through this process of unlearning.
Oh, yeah.
I thought I knew what an educator was because, again, how this is where I'm asking, where I'm posing it to you is how you
Yeah.
kind of go through education
Yeah.
shapes much of how you become an educator and what you
Yeah.
do in the
Mhm.
process. Um,
Mhm.
so much of what I saw was this is what it is,
Mm.
that I began to replicate that harm.
Yeah.
Talk to me about the
Yeah.
early years of
Yeah.
your teaching and what were some of the lessons you learned along the way?
Listen, that's yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I could say so much. That first year is always hard, right? That first year is always hard for anybody. For
Yeah.
everybody. Just year one teaching is like it's just a wash. In my case, there was that added layer of what I just shared. I'm walking back into the halls of the place that harmed me the most every
Yeah.
day,
Yeah.
every day, to work with kids that look like me, to work with kids that
Mm,
were me, to work with kids that I see outside on the street. So the way that high school is continues to be set up is that it's one high school, but it's got 6 sub high schools. And so I'm at one high
mm.
school. My baby sister is literally next door in the other high school. And my baby brother is in the third school. And my
Wow.
niece is in the fourth school. So this was not, yeah, it was I'm going to work, but I hope you understand that this was more than I'm going to work, right? I'm about to
Yeah.
go spend some time with the young people of my city.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
that that was a whole nother dimension. And so the level of protection that I felt over them was at times too much, right?
Mm,
Too much in the sense of there were things I shouldn't have done because I was not getting paid for that. And I was doing the work of other people that I should not. So
yeah.
I ended up, do you see what I'm saying, right? Like there were
Absolutely.
moments where I should not have stepped in because that teacher
Mm,
needed to work that out. But I came in and was really functioning from a place of pain and trauma. And so I
mm,
would step in and I would do the thing. And so now I solved it for this teacher. But and I'm not even trying to be a hero, but I'm operating in that way
yeah.
out of legit just trauma response.
Yeah.
Um, Simultaneously, I'm in an environment where I'm all my traumas are triggered. And so I've got my own defenses up.
Mm,
I tend to look younger than what I am. And so when I went in and I'm in my, I'm like 26, 20, 25, 26, I look like I'm 20, right? I look like I'm 3 years older than them.
yeah.
Um, and so I'm extra protective about that because that's also been a source of conflict for me in previous employment jobs at that point, where people would just like kind of speak to me very condescendingly and right. Plus, I'm a woman and I'm a Black and like all these other layers, right?
Mm,
Like add to the way I'm treated. And so, I walk in and I follow the whole don't let them smile. You
mm-hmm.
got hard. You got a tough love. You got to come in there. You're not their friend. And so it was just all these defense mechanisms that I had set up to try to survive. Like I went into survival mode yet again. And
Mm,
I remember at one point, towards the end of that first year, making the conscious decision. I had a moment where I was like, man, I'm going to have to plug in. Like for whatever reason, that was the analogy that came to me of plugging in. And what that meant to me was I'm going to have to invest because this is absolutely too much emotionally. Like
wow.
playing the game of this emotional disconnect when I'm not, and I'm just in this constant, like, survival mode. Like none of this
Mm,
is working. And so I was like, I'm going to have to plug in. I'm going to have to invest with these kids. I'm going to have to be okay with falling in love with them. Like, I just had to really I had to have a moment for myself, that first year was hard. And so year 2 was hard again for different reasons. I had a better dynamic with kids in the classroom. But that also meant I had to challenge my colleagues. And so when they were mistreating kids, like I just wasn't going to be cool with it. And that meant I
mm,
was going to have to challenge them and say something, or at least not follow along with the joke or walk away in the teacher's lounge, right? Like I could no longer, I couldn't, if it's a us versus them, I'm not with us, I'm with them.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I had to be really clear about what that looked like for me in action.
Yeah. Which, I mean, I'm imagining that takes a lot of work beforehand to know that you not only are you going to ruffle feathers, but there is, I'm going to say, a gang mentality sometimes in education where if you go against that which is happening, then you are, in a sense, bucking the system.
Mhm.
You're a disruptor, and
Right.
disruptors are seldom liked.
No. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so let me ask you this, right? So you now are in the classroom. You
Hmm.
are you
Hmm.
have grown through your years of education,
Yeah.
and now you are, um your personal experiences, the things that you have dealt with, have now kind of help you craft this, I'm going to say, inclusive, this welcome, the buzzwords we talk about,
Mhm.
but like
Right.
this inclusive
Yeah.
environment in your
Yeah.
classroom.
Yeah.
But we live in a world, though, where very many, like, students are coming from various backgrounds. They have
Hmm.
various understandings of their world. And
Hmm.
whether it be by ignorance, whether it be by lack of education, or this is what they've been told at home, there are some
Hmm.
controversial topics that sometimes can come up in
Hmm.
classroom if you're really doing this thing called education.
Hmm.
So,
Hmm.
how do you approach these open conversations about race and privilege and
Yeah.
conflict and all of that in your classroom? Because what I'm imagining is that there's an educator listening who is
Yeah.
like, I'm not touching that because
Yeah.
that's just too difficult.
Right. So, oof. When are you talking about present day or like I'm still rewinding? Where we at right now?
I would love if you could talk to me about what was
Okay.
and contrast it with now what is.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. So, when I started teaching, it was not this socio-political context that we're in right now. It's not this
Yeah.
political climate. So me saying I'm gonna teach a lesson on the N-word, which I would do, for example, it just wasn't a thing. It just nobody was messing with me. I think also my colleagues got to the point where they were like, we're gonna have to just leave her alone because right, like she's gonna push back. And so just let's just skip this.
Yeah.
Um, and so I never, it's funny that it was the most repressive location, in
Hmm.
the sense that we're taken over by the state. I'm limited on all the things, but in some ways, I have this other freedom within those four walls. Between me and these kids, because these kids are the kids that nobody wanted to teach, right? The me and the
Mm-hmm.
you. It's a predominantly Latino and immigrant community. And
Right.
so I'm sitting in there with my kids, right? And in there, I'm able to kind of, I have some flexibility, if you will, in there that I can
Yeah.
take advantage of, right? And so fast forward to being in Red, Texas, right? Red, Texas, which is when I wrote this book.
Right.
Um, and I'm in a completely different context. It's a predominantly white independent school. And so now
Mm.
there are classrooms where I'm the only person of color,
Yeah.
and so those same topics, they're just not going to flow the same way in
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
Those same topics here are going to ruffle feathers. They're going to make it home to the dinner table. I'm going to get an email the next day. I'm going to get a mom who wants to sit down and explain to me why her white male son feels offended by all of these conversations and
Wow.
what did she do to support him.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, the context became different. And I think that, what it looked like for me was simply adjusting the how. The what for me was non-negotiable. We
Hmm.
are going to talk about this. How we talk about this, well, that's how it's going to be different. Where,
Mm.
when, yes, that'll be different. And so that kind of just came along the way of just trying to navigate and figure it out. Year
Yeah.
one, I came in a little soft, right? Because I'm like, yo, this is a completely different context. Let me do some observation. Let me see what's up.
Right.
But once I figured it out and I was like, okay, year 2, I stepped it up, and year 3 and year 4 and year 5, right? Like every year I was like, okay, I could do more. I could push more. Let's do this. Let's push it that way. And I got to a point where I had built enough rapport with students. I had built enough rapport with my administrators that I was like, nobody's going to fire me. Right?
Mm,
Like, because I've earned this, right? They
yeah.
see my good work. They see the effectiveness. They see how much care I put into it. They see how much I've dedicated to the school community. I've got some leverage here. I've got some rapport I can leverage. I have some, um, just history, right? Like I got some time on this campus that now I can probably actually push back and resist in some important and meaningful ways. And so that just kind of comes with time and maturity and age.
Right. Right. I think that sometimes we have these conversations, and by we, I mean anyone who's engaged in conversations along the lines of
Mhm,
educational justice. And sometimes it can come off like we are talking about liberation in a vacuum, right? Where
mhm,
we don't acknowledge
mhm,
that, yeah, some of these things takes time and development. You might be in a context where it's not wise for you to take that decision to
mhm,
do that thing.
mhm, mhm,
Um, and we still live in a capitalist society, and you have to make
mhm,
money at the end of the day. So
mhm.
sometimes you have to make decisions that are hard.
Yeah.
Um, but all in all, one of the things that keep coming up as I'm listening to you is the idea of embracing the discomfort that comes with this decision.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
How and I think about, because if I'm not mistaken, you are currently in Florida.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Um,
Yes,
uh,
sir.
and where
Send help.
where Ron and them is at.
Listen.
And so I'm thinking about teachers in those locations,
Yeah.
um,
Mhm.
particularly where there's like, I'm in Jersey. There's not a lot of
Y'all are good.
pushback per se. I might have
I
to
mean, y'all got your
navigate
beefs, right? Because 'Cause you're in the United States, but
that
right?
part,
Yeah.
right? But it's not as overt or
Oh,
over the
yeah.
top, or not
Mhm.
part of the political context of
Yep.
the moment,
Yep.
in the same ways. So now I'm thinking about the teacher who is trying to create this supportive environment, who's
Yeah.
trying to create an
Mhm.
environment where students can feel supported to have these difficult competitions, but
Yeah.
excuse me, difficult topics to be talked about,
Yeah. Yeah.
but they're in places where it's hostile to
Yeah.
talk
They're
about it.
they're limited. Mhm.
How What can you
What do
say
we
to that
do?
teacher? Yeah. What does that look
What
like?
do we do? So, I've been answering this very question now for, I would say, a year.
Yes, you have.
In all my conversations and keynotes and in workshops, like everywhere, because everybody wants to know how y'all doing it, right? Because it's not just Florida, right? Like Iowa was actually the first state to pass any
Right.
anti-CRT legislation in 2021.
Right.
Um, so obviously there's Texas, there's us, there's Mississippi, the Carolinas ain't far behind, Kentucky's right there, Tennessee ain't playing, right? So like there's several, Georgia's not. And
Right.
so and then there's pockets in other places. There's pockets in California, pockets in upstate New York, pockets in Illinois, etc., where this stuff is also happening. So first, I think it's important for people to take inventory of their context, right? Do
Mhm.
you have supportive administrators who are about this work? Then you should be okay, right? Like you want to have that kind of support. You don't, then you gonna bring it back a couple notches.
Right, right,
Um,
right.
right? Because this is about endurance as well. Part of the goal of all of this legislation is to get rid of us. And one of
Right.
the ways that we win is by saying, no, I'm not going anywhere. You don't want me to say the word anti-racism? Okay, let's call it love. I don't care what language. That's number two. It doesn't matter
That's
what your
good.
language is, bro. Like if certain words are legislated again, you can't say white privilege. Okay, call it something else, right? Like the concept is still the concept, but you can still do the work.
Right.
No,
Right.
and then the third thing is to know your limitations. Even if you are, so for example, I'm working with a school. I'm not naming any names for protection, but I'm working with a school that's in Central Florida.
Okay.
And their administrator, obviously, they brought us in, is in full support of this work. And the teachers, everybody's down, okay? And they're still like, hey, but we want to make sure we're covered just in case, right? And so we're working on how do we still do this work by using other language?
Right.
And how can we be sure to use this work, okay, or do this work in a way that is embedded? How can I say it? Like, well, we've just been saying, like, we're not going to use those trigger words, but then also, like, what is at the root of the work? Right. So if
Mhm.
instead of saying we're going to become anti-racist teachers, we're just going to be more loving and inclusive. That's what's
Yeah.
at the root, right? That's what's at the root of that anyway. And so we're just going to call it that, and so that's some of what's happening. I want people, you didn't ask me this, but I'm going to say this part. I
Please.
want people to who are outside of the South, particularly, to understand that here in the South, in this current political climax, we're doing the work. The work everybody always talking about?
They do
We're
talk
the
about
ones
that.
doing it because we're
Yeah.
the ones in the context. If your
Mm.
governor ain't this governor, then you're not resisting this governor. We are resisting this governor. Right. And I don't mean to say that as like oppression Olympics or no, not at all. But I feel like people, they show up in the comments, oh, just get rid of Florida, cut Florida off. Oh,
Right.
everybody separate from Texas. It's like, what? If you got rid of the South, you wouldn't have the civil rights movement.
Right.
And
Right.
this is not on the topic, but what I'm trying to say is,
No,
what I'm
no, you're good.
trying to say is, right, is that this work, a lot of it too is underground. Right, a lot of it too
Mm.
cannot be publicized. There's a lot that we're doing in the state of Florida that we cannot share on social media, that I don't tweet about, because what I'm not going to do is mess up the work. What I'm not going to do
Yeah.
is wave a flag and say, hey, we're over here, we over. Nah, y'all can keep your eyes over there, stay over there.
Right.
you
Which
know
brings up a very interesting point, and this isn't necessarily on topic, but I'll go here just for a
That's
second.
okay.
Is there is a sense in which there are folks who want this as long as it's profitable, or they want to do this work as long as it is convenient, as long
Yeah,
as I can put my name attached to it, right? And
yeah.
I'm saying this in a
Hmm.
space, in a place where there isn't much pushback, but I know personally
Yeah.
people who will reject any forward progress if their name isn't attached to it.
Oh, wow. Wait. I'm trying to understand what you were saying. And you don't
Yeah,
need
yeah,
to give
yeah.
me names, but give me an example if you can, so I can understand. Because I thought you were saying maybe we are, maybe I do. I don't
Well, no,
know.
we're saying the same thing. I'm
Okay.
gonna give you two different examples. All right.
Okay.
So first, um, let's just say
Yeah.
that you identified a need in your community,
Okay.
um, and you organized and put some things together,
Okay. Got
right?
it. I get.
With a
Okay.
collective group, right? Like a
Yes.
thing, any whatever this thing is.
Yeah.
And
Sure.
let's say that at the end of that,
Mm,
that folks came back and were upset
yeah.
that you did it because they didn't know about it.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
That's
Yeah. Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
one.
Right.
And then
Yeah.
the other side
Come on now.
is
Who got
if
time
we
for that kind
can't
of stuff
tweet,
anymore?
post, share,
It didn't
um,
happen,
it didn't happen.
and it ain't yours.
Right. Right. And so all of that, it creates this struggle, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
um and brings you to something that you say in your book that I want to read. I want to take you right to it. And it's actually
Okay.
like right at the beginning.
Okay.
Um I love it because it's a call to where we should be. And it says, um, a love that fights for liberation
Yeah.
with relentless hope. It is a revolution.
Yeah.
A la lucha is in my veins. This love can only exist when you are tender, vulnerable, and
Yeah.
when you truly see the person in front of you. I want to stop there.
Mm-hmm.
There
Mm.
are times
Yeah.
where I'm working with a school or um, and I'll see interactions between teachers and students.
Yeah.
And the way you really know somebody, like the way you know you really love
Mm.
is when something is seemingly, I'm going to use the word unlovable in front of you. When there's
Sure.
something that is unsettling in front of you, that's like a real test.
Yeah.
Um, but I see a lot of
Mm.
times folks will venture into what I like to call, they're not necessarily restorative conversations, they're performative. They
Mhm.
wanna, like, really be seen saying the right thing,
Yeah.
doing the quote "right thing," but their heart's not necessarily in it, and they're not necessarily engaged in a wavelength that says, "I truly see the person in front of me." They're more like inputting an equation and trying to get
That's
to the end result of, "Can we just get
yeah,
back to what we were doing?"
that's right.
Versus really seeing the person. And so
Mhm.
that brings me to this question for you, and this might be in your work, in your consulting work, um, it might be in your personal practice or those around you. How can teachers who, let's just say, have been a little resistant to, or don't truly see the students in front of them, don't truly see people in front of them, how do we begin to cultivate that type of love in our learning spaces when it seems like sometimes like all humanity is lost in school?
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I mean, you just described that really well in terms of those interactions. I actually think several things. One,
Mhm.
um, I think that too many teachers don't understand the history of US schooling.
Mhm.
They don't understand their role in this systematic oppression.
Mm.
Right? Like we're able to think of, for example, oh, standardized testing, and we might see like, oh yeah, this is a systematic thing that is right, like how it's working out, and everybody can agree that it's wrong. But they don't necessarily see their day-to-day actions as part of a larger action that has a historical context. So the fact that you
Mm.
just didn't say my name right again, it's not just that you didn't say my name right. It's like boom, that has an entire history, right?
Yeah.
There's that. I think too, in teachers' defense and everybody's defense, really, the way that schooling is designed right now, it's just not conducive for us to have those meaningful relationships.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
is designed for us to be very transactional, for me to say, hey, come in, behave, sit down, do the work, give it back to me. I give it back to you with a good, with a grade. Maybe you give it back, right? Boom, we did it. That's the year you were a good student. It
Mm.
is a very transactional experience. That's why I talk about being experiential. Like we have to break that because that's how we're
Yeah.
going to humanize this room, right?
Yeah.
Um, and then I think, I think also that people, not just teachers, people. I don't know that we really understand love.
That's good.
And there's levels to love, right? Like there's your romantic love. I'm not asking you to have that in the classroom. I'm
Mm.
asking you to have, the same kind of love that people feel during Christmas and they're walking around and they see a homeless person and they want to give them something. That love that pushes you to think of someone other than yourself, to give, to sacrifice. I wish we had that love all year long.
Mm.
And I wish that love was in schools, not in a condescending, look at this homeless kid way. No, because when you see these homeless people, I don't know why I'm just going off on this tangent for a second, but I feel like we also have this unhoused problem in the country, right? So that's on my mind. But I find that during the season, or like these types of periods of holidays in this nation, we see humanity in people. That's the whole point. That's the season,
Yeah.
right? You watch the movie where it's like, oh, that's some guy who knows who he is. And then towards the end, it's like, oh, look, he's a dad, you love him. Right. So like we just don't do that in schools with kids, particularly, especially kids of color,
Mm.
especially boys of color. We don't.
Yeah.
What we see are
Yeah.
the problems, we see the work we have to do, we see the burdens, right? And so we localize problems in people.
Mm.
And
Mm.
so it really is like a layered thing. So that's why, there's folks who will be like, you got to love students. And in my head, I'm like, yes, this is true, but that just doesn't do it. To say that, to demand that of people, to say build relationships. What does that mean? This is more than build a relationship. You can have a
That's good.
relationship that's toxic. I don't want
That's
you to
good.
build that kind of relationship. You can have what you're describing, a transactional relationship that you think is cool because you're being nice about it,
Right. Right.
you know?
To,
So
and to your point really quickly, I've seen a bunch of teachers who say like, I did have a restorative conversation, and it's like, no, you was just nice nasty. You know what I mean? Like you
and
you
kids see
said in
right
front of that.
through it.
That
Kids
part.
see right through it. They don't have the filters that we have as adults in the same way, right? Because as an adult, I'm like, oh, in my mind, right? I'm like, oh, you trying to play this game? Okay, cool. I'm gonna play with you then, right? Like I've got a long game. I have vision. I can be like, I'm gonna get my revenge later, right? Like there's things that I can do as an adult, but as a
Yeah.
kid, I am at your
Yeah.
mercy. I don't have
Right.
this kind of time, right?
Yeah.
Like your grade could determine literally the quality of my life, Bobby. If this English teacher
Mm,
fails me, I don't graduate high school.
right.
What am I going to
Right.
do in 2024 without a high school diploma? So guess what? We're not going to get past this situation. You don't get to restore this relationship by with some transactional conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. That's real good. It kind of, you mentioned it, so I want to take us here in this wonderful book. Uh, you mentioned 4 principles: flexibility,
Mhm.
interdisciplinary design, experiential learning, and student-driven approach.
Yeah.
Um, talk to us about how. Well, let me say this, and I think you used that analogy in here. But my
Okay.
aunt, my great aunt, she she used to um, be sitting in her rocking chair, and
Mhm.
she'd be weaving.
That's right.
And I would be like a little kid sitting down playing a game or something on the floor. And when I would look up at what she was doing, it looked chaotic,
Mess.
wild. I have no idea what she's doing. Like,
Right.
what
It's
is
like
going on?
that's ugly. Yeah.
Yes. But
Yeah.
when she invited me to sit next to her and
I'm
look at
here.
what she was seeing,
Yeah.
I began to see how all these textures, patterns, and things that she was doing put together this wonderful tapestry.
Yeah. Yeah.
For your call to texture teaching, these are the kind of threads that you're weaving. Talk to us about these threads,
Yeah.
why they are so needed, impactful, and just kind of the significance of how you arrived at these 4 disciplines.
Yeah. So that was a really good way that you just broke that down. I'm gonna take it. But I'm gonna cite you, don't worry.
I appreciate you.
um so I came to learn and understand about culturally sustaining pedagogy when Dr. Django Paris was formulating it originally, and I was like, this, how you started by saying that this book helped you have some language. That's exactly how I felt.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, this is what I'm trying to do. This is what it means to do the type of stuff I'm doing. This is it. And
Yeah.
so texture teaching is the documentation of what I was doing and what a bunch of other colleagues around the country that I was talking to were doing. I was like, all right, these
Yeah.
are the practices, right? So this is the stance or the theory that informs me. These are the values that I have as a teacher. And so when you put those 2 things together, what does it look like in practice?
Yeah.
And so for me, I was able to come up with those 4 traits. And when you're enacting those 4 traits, as you're working towards social justice through education, that is texture teaching.
Mm,
And those 4 traits are I think pivotal to everything we've been talking about, right? Like this is how you're going to
right.
build rapport. This is how you're going to have actually engaging content. This is how you're going to meet those standards regardless of the state that you're in, right? You're going to have
Yeah.
rigorous academics. Like this is how you do quote unquote the work regardless
Yeah.
of your context. How you do it, that can shift. But that you're doing it, that's a non-negotiable,
Right.
you know?
Right.
And so to be student driven and community centered is really important because when we look at the history of US schooling, it has sought to remove those 2 things, right? The way school functions is very much this is the adult, they tell us what to do, they design all the things, right? Like kids don't really have a say in any of their learning or can even drive how they can even express what they're learning, right?
Right.
Being community centered is critical because these schools have historically been sources of vilification for us. Like, just think about, for example, how education was used as a weapon. We are literally in 2024 still unearthing the bodies of Indigenous children, right?
Mm,
At
hmm.
these educational sites. I think about the fact that for African Americans, specifically on this land, it was illegal to practice literacy. You could be killed not
Yeah.
for hurting someone, not for lying. I mean, yes, those two things, right? But like, because I could read the alphabet, you're going to kill me.
Yeah.
That's education, right? And so we can go down the line for all these other groups, all these other specifically racial and ethnic groups. And so, to say that this is a place where we're actually going to study, welcome, and find academic value in your voice and your community is undoing that harm immediately.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so to teach also in interdisciplinary ways is to say our problems in society are actually interdisciplinary. They're complicated problems,
Right.
right?
Right.
Growth and success in the future is interdisciplinary. And
Mm.
so your learning must meet that.
Yeah.
This compartmentalized, we're doing math from 10 to 11 a.m. Like, it's not going to get us there. When I think of, right now I'm doing a little Black inventors unit. And as I was looking through it, I'm like, man, these Black folks went out here and did all the interdisciplinary learning that school wasn't going to give them.
Yeah.
When I think of like, whatever, let me not get off topic. So then we get to, experiential learning.
Mm.
And what I'm talking about there is to undo and speak against the requirement in schools right now for us all to be numb. In order for me to do
Mm.
well in school as a student, my job, as we just described, is to come in, sit down, shut up, do the work, turn it in, and be out. Participate when the teacher says, don't get too mad, don't get too sad, don't get too happy. Don't be too engaged. That's too much talking. But don't be quiet either, because then you're disengaged, right? And so there is this performance, and really it's body management. We think
Yes.
called classroom management, but it is body management, right? And so that's what I'm talking about in experiential learning, which leads us also to flexibility. And so what I'm advocating for through flexibility is that we be flexible both academically but also culturally,
Yeah.
right? So opening the door to different forms of what counts in academics, and saying, you know what, you wearing that hoodie actually does not impair any cognitive activities in your brain. You can keep it on. I'm just not going to die on this hill.
Yeah.
Like, this ain't it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
Let me jump in really quickly there and say, like, that's real, right? And I think that
Yeah.
sometimes we have these conversations, and you can look and be like, well, you there's an assumed perfection of people on your screen talking to you about something. And, like, let me say that even this year, there was a sense in which there was so I'm trying to make an impact in my school. I'm trying to build the rapport with teachers. We have this hoodie policy, and for a couple weeks, man, I'm going through. I'm like, man, take you already knew, blah blah blah. I'm taking hoodies, and at a certain point, I'm like,
Is
why
this
am I
it?
doing this?
Is
Like,
this it?
why am I
Mhm.
doing this? Um, and I think that, one, I want to encourage folks, like, the learning is never done, right? And you can easily fall into patterns of control, of compliance,
Yeah.
without ever questioning. And I want to
Yeah.
encourage folks, like,
Yeah.
continue to ask questions of why we are doing things the way
Yes.
we're doing them, right?
Yeah.
Um, and it brings up a point that I wanted to ask you about, and you mentioned this in your book, and that is, I think about when COVID hit. Okay,
Mm.
and we're in March, and we thought it was 2 weeks, right? And it turned into a very long time.
Today.
Um,
Yeah.
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 Um, in that process,
Mm.
money was handed out. The school
Mhm.
district said, "Okay,
Mm.
cool. We're gonna get every child a
Mhm.
Chromebook."
Yep.
Everybody got a Chromebook.
Attendance didn't matter. Tests out the window. Yep.
Yeah, yeah. Just take these Chromebooks, and we're gonna make it flexible. We're gonna do all these things to try to make it work. Here's the other thing that happened too. Everybody got a computer, but didn't no district say, you know what? Wait a minute. Do you have access to Wi-Fi, like adequate Wi-Fi to do the learning at home? Like, can I ask you some more intricate questions to make sure that I'm not just doing the same thing for everybody, but actually I'm looking at what you need,
Right.
right? And so
Right.
I still think
Right.
that that's a struggle in education. We still don't know the difference between equality
Mhm.
and equity.
Right.
And partly because, and you talk about this in your book, so you say that that it's love that will allow us to truly
Yeah.
see the person in front of us, which
Yeah.
will lead us to ask that question, going back to your Christmas analogy.
Mhm. Mhm.
um so my question is for folks who may still be struggling,
Yeah.
trying to do the same thing to everybody, and who might hear this and say, listen, I don't have time to
Oh,
do
time.
this extra thing that you are
Yeah.
asking me to do. What do
Right,
you say
right,
to
right.
that person?
Yeah. So, you said something that I wanted to say something too. Oh, right. I think that there are people who love kids, who
Mhm.
have all the right intentions and don't know what they don't know.
Yeah.
That's very real too. And so they wouldn't even know to ask those questions because they think that they're already doing right by kids. But I think in such a case, when you are smacked with the mistake, because that's what's going to happen, it's all in how you respond.
Mm,
If you don't love that kid or that family, if you don't respect this community, then you're not going to respond humbly,
that's good.
right? Like your pride is going to show up, and you're going to be like, "Psh, who are y'all to tell me?" Da, 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 da. And then it's like, oh, okay, it was all superficial anyway. So anyway, what do I say? Well, first of all, I would say two things. One, texture teaching is not about what you're teaching. So this
That's
is
good.
not an extra unit. This is not a book you're teaching. This is not a lesson. This is how you're doing what you are already doing. This is
Hmm.
about curriculum design. This is about how are you structuring your learning experiences with students. I don't care if you're a math teacher or a science teacher, second grade or 12th grade. How are you doing it in a way that is student driven, community centered, interdisciplinary, experiential, and flexible? How are you infusing all of this in your practice?
Yeah.
So don't worry about adding. You don't need to add. You might not tweak anything, right? Like you might just make little tweaks here and there.
Yeah.
The other thing is the thing about time, and it's true. Time, Roberto says this all the time. He says time is another four-letter word, and it is, right? Like who
Hmm.
has time?
Hmm.
Nobody got time. And yet, Bobby, tell me that teachers don't be finding time for the things they want to find time for. Okay. And we attach it to some. So guess what? We go and watch Finding Nemo, and I'm attaching it to three common core standards, because we know how to do that. So we
Yeah.
have and find and make time for what we
Absolutely.
want to do. And I'm not even against the movie. Do the movie. I did the movie. I'm down for the movie. Right.
Right.
But my point is that can't be your point of resistance to practice teaching in an equity and equitable and just way. That can't
Yeah.
be it. That can't. It's
Yeah.
not time. Let it be something else.
You know what's interesting to your point about time is I lived this, right? You you had time
Mm,
when the kid did X, Y, and Z.
yeah.
Then you addressed it with the kid and kicked them out your classroom. So you had
Sure.
time there. You had time to get everybody in your classroom working on an independent practice problem while you went in the hallway to talk to the student. You had time when you talked to the student, and then it became talking over the student, not hearing the student, not giving the
Being
student
arguing.
ground to be able to, not a conversation. No, you just said
Yeah.
what you needed to say. So you
Right.
had
Right.
time there. You had time to send them to me. You had time to write it up. You had time, like, so you had all this time. And when I say,
Right.
hey, take a deep breath,
Change your time.
let's revisit this in a way that could be more beneficial and keep kids in
Right.
class on task, learning and growing. Let's actually do this in a way that recognizes the humanity of kids. When I say do that, oh no, we don't have time for all of that.
Right.
But you had all this time when you wrote me the soliloquy about what the
Mm.
person was doing in your
Not a
classroom and how mad
soliloquy,
you were.
a whole
Yeah,
soliloquy.
all of it, all of it, and addendums
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
an accompanying email and pictures
Receipt.
and this and
Yeah.
that, right? Like it's all the things.
Yeah.
And so, to your point about time, it's I
Yeah.
understand the pressure of time, and
Yes.
shout out to teachers who are doing amazing work and showing up every day, because
Absolutely.
I understand that
Absolutely.
like we put so much pressure on teachers,
Yes.
right? Um, and so and this is a big one to my point. Marty says, don't forget about the time to make sure that the leader did something about it. That's a big one. When they come back and want to see, what did you do with that thing that I gave you? Like you had time to check behind me. Like you didn't
Mhm.
have time. Like you have all the time in the world when it has to do with a whole bunch of other things than what I'm asking you to do.
Yeah.
Um, and so here's where I want to push us, right? Is as we're rounding out time, I'm
Mm.
thinking about educators now who are going to go back tomorrow,
Mhm. Mm.
um,
Mhm.
who are going to be experiencing um, the throes of all it means to do the work, right?
Right.
And you say this all the time. I've been following you for some time, and you talk about this gray space in the classroom
Yeah.
where where students can explore these issues, students can have space to kind of um, make mistakes, think about it, talk, discuss, learn, and grow. But what does when you say gray space, what does that mean? And how does it contribute to something that I think is sorely missing, which is critical thinking and understanding
Mm.
of complex issues? Because you mentioned that before.
Yeah. Yeah. So I when I say gray space, what I mean is that classrooms are not, pun intended, simply black and white spaces, right? Like it's not as simple as this is what's right, this is what's wrong all the time.
Right.
And issues are complicated. We're seeing that right now, even with this current genocide happening, right?
Mm,
Are there some elements of it that are black and white? Absolutely. Absolutely. And there's also what I'm going to call a quote unquote gray history, right?
mm,
Things have been done, people have been fighting, things that, right? Like all kinds of things. And the truth is that Jewish people, for example, did experience a Holocaust. Anti-Semitism is a global phenomenon, right? And so that's a little bit of the gray.
yeah.
And so we can't, in the quest to simply, for that instant gratification of social media, be like, boom, it's black and white. And the
Yeah.
same is in our classrooms. You want to have a conversation about, whatever, the legalization of marijuana. Well, just know that in your classroom, you might have some kids who have relatives in jail because of it. Immediately, that makes this a hard, real conversation.
For sure.
And so the gray area is going to pop up, meaning the
Yeah.
messiness, the nuance, the complexity of these issues. That's where we live.
Yeah.
When we teach kids the binary way of thinking of like right, wrong, simple. There's no complicated anything to it. That's how we get people who are like, I'm either going to believe in climate change or not. There is no in between. That's how we get
Hmm.
to this moment where we're so polarized because people are
Yeah.
like, it's this or that. There's no complexity. There's no in between. And that's not true. That is not
Yeah.
real of humanity. And so our classrooms are gray spaces because guess who's in there? People.
People. Yeah.
People. Each
Yeah.
one of us got a bag, like Erica Badu says. Each one of us got a bag, and we
Yeah.
walking in there. Each one of us, teacher included. And those bags, we unpack them, and now it's a mess in here. And that's what it
Yeah.
is. That's part of the work. That's the
And
gray area that I'm talking about.
it comes with truly seeing kids too, because kids walk in with invisible backpacks every day.
That's right. That's
And
right.
when you refuse to see our students, when you refuse to see our babies,
Mm-hmm.
um, you you walk into it and you boil them down to, again, this transactional understanding
Right.
of of things where their humanity is erased and all they are numbers, metrics, data points, and they're no longer a kid. Um, which bring like to this point right here, and I want you to jump in because you were going to say it's just
Yes.
we we want as adults in buildings, we want the gray space, we want grace.
What I was gonna
Um,
say. Mm-hmm.
we forget that all the desires that we have, sometimes we forget to give that to our babies
Mm-hmm.
that we see every single day. For sure,
Mm-hmm.
for sure.
That's what I
Uh,
was gonna say, right? Like, teach from the teacher's point of view, an administrator, a school principal, or a curriculum coach, or whatever it is. is quote unquote ineffective if they aren't interacting with us, if there's no relationship outside of evaluations, if they're
That's
not
good.
present in the hallway, if we don't feel seen or understood by them, if they don't give us a chance, if they don't, right? Like if they're not flexible with us.
Yeah,
But when we get into that classroom, boy, it's due and it's due now. And that's it. No late papers.
that's it.
Or you get
That's it.
points taken off. What if your boss was like, what if your principal was like, I'm deducting from your paycheck because your lesson plan was late? We'd be like, this is an atrocity, rightfully so.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And
You know?
I will say, as someone who has to do that, that there are times where I'm looking at 3 o'clock and I'm like, and I try to give grace and space, but I'm
Right.
telling you, it happens so often. And
Yeah.
I'm like, or I'm in a faculty meeting and I'm talking to teachers and they're having all these conversations. And I'm like, do you realize you would kick you out of your class right now?
I did that the other day. I was working with a group of teachers and I started the day by, this was at a school, and I started the day by having them outline what are all the problems? What is it? What is it that the kids are doing? Why is behavior such a mess? And so, they're writing all the things. And then, I'm facilitating a large group conversation. Why did they do half of the things on the list? And I was like, and I understood. I understood
Yeah.
what, like I wasn't even hurt or offended by it. And I said,
Yeah.
now, towards the end, I was like, now I just want y'all to know something. Boom, 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 boom. Y'all just did that. I said, so we're going to be real in here. I'm going to hold you
That's good.
accountable.
Yeah.
Right? In the way that you want to hold them accountable, y'all are going to have to measure up to that same stick,
Yeah. Yeah. That's real good. So I want to ask you one more question, and then I want you to tell folks how to connect with you and stuff. But my,
Yeah,
my
yeah, yeah.
question is this: as we close off and people go back to work, one of the things that I'm not gonna say scared for. One of the things I know happens
Mm,
is our cling, our desire for our fixation with perfectionism.
mhm, mhm,
So if I'm not going to do it perfect, I'm not going to do it at all.
mm,
And we don't quote
mm.
step up and do the work because, oh, I'm going to mess up. And so I'm not going to do it at all.
Yeah.
Um, just some thoughts about that and how you encourage teachers around this myth of perfectionism.
Yeah, that's good. Um, I remember one time somebody actually said that. They were like, I'm just not sure if I feel like that if I do it wrong, right, I could cause more harm. And I said, yeah, you might run that risk. And so I gave them an analogy. I said, let's say that you're at a bus stop and there's a man beating a woman. There are so many ways for
Mm,
you to intervene. There's so much that you can do. But if you stand there in fear of doing the wrong thing, he could kill her. So those are your
mm,
options. Allow him to kill her or step in, call 911, scream, throw a rock, right? Like anything is better than
yeah,
nothing. And can you
yeah,
later talk to the woman and say, I'm sorry that I did what I did. I wasn't sure how to do it, but it's good to see that you're okay now.
yeah.
So, yeah, it might not be perfect. You may make mistakes, but that's what forgiveness, mercy, and grace are for in that classroom.
Mm,
And it is
mm,
better for you to say something, for you to speak up. For example, something happens in your class, a kid done the wrong thing and hurt another student. It is better for you to say or do something than to let it go.
yeah,
It is better for you to say, hey, you know what, this month, I'm not sure exactly whatever, but here's what I have up on the wall. Anybody want to discuss that? Something, an effort is better than nothing.
yeah, yeah. I'd say all the time to teachers, make sure that if you're going to fail, fail forward, get up and
Right.
try again.
Right.
Um, and I hope that they get that from you and appreciate
Mm,
the time and space that you're sharing with us. I want folks to be able to connect with you, connect with your books, your work. Please
yeah.
plug all your stuff. How can
All the
folks
things.
be able to connect with you and your work?
Yes, yes. Well, they can follow us on Multicultural Classroom on Instagram as well as on TikTok, even though, I'm not really over there like that.
Not over there. Yeah,
But you'll find us there. We're also
yeah.
on YouTube, and they can follow me independently at Nena Germán on Twitter or X or whatever. I don't call it that. So I'm
I
in
don't know what
denial.
that is. It's Twitter.
Right, right. But they can also visit the website, multiculturalclassroom.com, and they can get access to the book and other resources and all kinds of things and find me there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, we thank you so much for sharing time and space with us. And I hope that every single person is encouraged. Those who are tapping into the replay, please make sure you go support
Yes,
my
yes,
sis. Grab this book, grab it.
yes.
I,
You.
I I got this thing on in my hands, and I got it on audiobook. I listened to it.
Oh, okay.
Absolutely. I try to immerse myself in it because it's something that I
Uh-huh.
believe in so much. So thank you for
Oh,
your work, and thank you for what
yes.
it means
Thank
for so
you.
many of
Thank you for
us.
this time and this space. Good conversation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Till next time, y'all, let's keep pushing. Peace.